Hey, welcome back. So good to be with everybody, and always good to have my friend and trusted advisor and colleague Matt back. Welcome back, buddy.
Hey, thanks.
I missed you last week. I was on my own, and everybody out there always is missing you. So,
Well, that's fantastic. You just didn't happen to tell me when we were recording, so I don't know how we should take that.
So, Matt and I, we always are trying to think about what topic for this week. What do we come up with? And it usually has something to do with what we're experiencing either in our coaching lives or personal lives, and real world applicability to this past week. And this week is we want to talk about a topic that came up in one of my coaching encounters. And it's about tough conversations. And I don't know about you, but I have very few people that I work with that say, Bill, you know the thing I love? Tough conversations. How about you?
Never.
No.
Never. A lot of people don't like conflict. And I think what we're going to talk about today is what do we do before we get to that conflict? Because there are resolutions and things and, different ways to communicate. But like a lot of what we do, how do we not get ourselves in that position? And what are the stages and steps leading up to it?
Yeah, because oftentimes when a client calls us and says, hey, having this problem, right? I'm in this situation, having this encounter, having a difficult conversation. How do I manage that? Well, or I love when they call and say, how do I fix that? Sometimes we say you don't. Like, it's too late. We should have been ahead of this one a few weeks back or a few months back. And we think the right time to have tough conversations is before they're tough. So when can we have those conversations when people are still open to possibilities versus being under the crunch, being under the gun? And I think when we introduce the tough topics early, before they become tough, then it's much easier for us to get to good outcomes, good solutions. And really what we're doing at that point is managing expectations.
Well, and we open by saying how many people like tough conversations, and the people that we coach do not. So think about the individual on the other side of the table, the prospect, the client, perhaps someone internally. As we lead and manage, we have to have tough conversations or get ahead of those tough conversations. So just like they don't want to do it, that's when communication stops. That's when they clam up. That's when they might not answer the phone all of a sudden after all through the process they picked up. And now, we start to lose, whether it's control of the situation or control of the sales cycle, or of the expectations overall.
And that's where emotions become more inflamed, and emotions become, I think, more triggered and shorter. So how do we get ahead of that, right? How do we have the tough conversation before it gets tough? Well, let's talk about a couple examples. I have a situation with one client that, and you mentioned internal, because it's not always external challenges we have. I have a client that's in sales. He's a sales leader, and he's had some difficult conversations internally with his peers in HR or in finance or in legal around end of quarter stuff, right? So many of us at the end of the quarter, we're fighting to get deals in. We're fighting to get terms approved either from legal or from finance. And when it's at that point, when it's like 3 days left in the quarter, and I'm saying, hey, why can't we accept 90-day payment terms? It's probably too late. That's a conversation I should be accelerating into the first month of the quarter, right? That's a situation that we should be accelerating early. So in the case of this client, what I explained and what we worked on was, hey, it's important for you to get out ahead of these things. It's important for you to have the conversations before they become urgent. Because, when we talk time management, right, Matt, what's one of the critical things? What's that magic quadrant of time management? It's the important.
But not urgent.
Not urgent. When we let things become important and urgent, now emotion's in the game, right? Now that urgency starts to take over. And we have competing needs, people with competing needs, competing outcomes, competing measurements, timelines. That's all at a fight now. So now we're becoming more emotionally dug in. First month of the quarter, as a sales leader, it's real easy for me to go to legal and say, hey, friend in legal, here's 4 deals that are critical to my success this quarter. Here's 4 deals that are going to move the needle for our team, for our organization, and meeting our goals this year or this quarter. Let's talk about them. Let's talk about the intricacies of them. What's important for you on this one? Here's where they're pushing back. Last time we negotiated this contract with them, they said blah, right? They couldn't accept whatever the term was. How can we approach that this year? How should we deal with this? That's an easy conversation to have in October, month one of the quarter, much easier than it is to have on December 29th. Right?
Yes, absolutely.
Because this is why you laugh.
I'm thinking of a deal that I was trying to get on the 30th of December.
But on December 29th and the 30th, like, who wants to have these deep conversations about issues? I want to get home. I want to go be with my family. I want to get this strapped up. I can't take, and if it's our team, we can't bend over at that point and just give up, right? And if the client, they're going to push it till the end if they can because they think they might have leverage. If we're dealing with that early before it becomes a difficult conversation in October, we're in a much better place.
Well, the big thing is managing expectations. And
By the way, you could stop right there and that could be the episode,
Yeah.
right? I mean, because managing expectations is a baseline for every relationship. And you've heard us say before, sorry, I'm running over you, but
okay.
you know, when we manage expectations or when we fail to manage expectations, it's the roadmap for defeat. It's a roadmap for a broken relationship. Every broken relationship, whether it's familial, right? Whether it's husband and spouse or husband and wife, whether it's family, whether it's work, boss and subordinate, any failed relationship is really a failure to meet expectations. So,
And one of the easiest ways to do that, language that I love, is what does success look like in this engagement, in this encounter? Obviously, talking about outcomes and timelines and aspects, and we get the question all the time of how do we prove that we know what we're talking about as we introduce and start suggesting that you manage or control encounters with the questions you ask, not the info you have to give. A lot of salespeople are like, oh, well, you know, I have a lot of good widgets to talk about and bells and whistles and all of that. But in this moment of managing expectations and starting to unravel and unpack that, I think is a great opportunity to show your expertise, to show your worth. Typically in situations like this, blank might happen. The last deal, our client might tell you to think about X or Y or Z, and we can start having some of those conversations and wrap into and move into. Let me ask you this: what happens if blank happens?
love that question.
What do we do then? And we can pull in that experience there to start proactively working on it. You know, a couple episodes ago, we discussed the recession and labor and inflation and all of that. And it's a great opportunity to start talking about that. You know, what happens if? What happens if you take this to the board and this is outside your budget? You know, what happens if someone that, you know, you discuss this with a colleague, and they say, this is more than we paid last year. And we get ahead of it proactively, and not only get ahead of it, but start building a game plan if that actually happens. And one more thing, a one thing question, you know, another great opportunity. I don't want to go off the subject too much, but that what happens if managing expectations and one thing questions, I think really tie in well to this subject to get ahead of these challenges and not allow them to fester. And as I think we were calling the episode, having tough conversations, you know,
Before they're tough.
Before they're tough.
Yeah, and you know, now that Matt said, "What happens if?" and I love setting hypotheticals. I love setting future case scenarios that are based on our experience, and we call those client reference stories. Right, when we're referring to a client and telling a story about them that somebody could put themselves in the position of. But you asked the question. You know, we have another client this past week that said, "We're having a problem. You know, we have this one client. We're like 20% into the project, and we're 50% into the budget. How do we have that conversation?" I said, "Well, glad I'm not having it," right? Because at that point, it's tough once you're into it that deep. Versus saying, "Hey, before it gets tough, let's ask this. Let's say, hey, sometimes what we find is once we leave this meeting and we begin to work and begin executing on the project, and we have our timeline, we have our scope of work built out. Sometimes there's scope creep, and when that scope creep comes in, you know, we feel like we need to say yes to all the requests because we're kind and we like to work with you and we like to show you that we care and we're easy to work with. The problem becomes when we say yes and we end up 20% of the way into the project, yet we've already used up 50% of the budget. How would you feel if that happened? So think about that as a hypothetical before we go forward on the project. What if we asked that at the kickoff meeting? What if we asked that at the signing meeting, that closing meeting? What if we plant that? What reactions are we going to get? Mm-hmm. Well, you might get the reaction that says, yeah, hey, we get it. Sometimes that happens. We have plenty of money. Don't worry, right? We just want a great outcome and a great project. If that's the case, please call us. We'd like to meet with that client as well. If that's not the case and you hear something more like, that'd be tragic. I'd lose my job. I'd have to go to my boss. That would be horrible. Who would approve that? I said, well, that's why I brought it up, because we don't want to get in that situation. So to make sure we don't, how would you like us to communicate when we're getting close to that scope creep, when we find ourselves teetering that line, right? How do you want us to communicate to your team if they're making requests that we know aren't in and we should probably be pushing back on? Mm-hmm. They give you authority to say no, right? When you have that conversation before it gets difficult, you're going to get authority for how they want you to treat them. You're going to get authority to be the subject matter expert that you are. And at that point, they see it as good counsel. They see it as good consulting. They see it as you being a professional, the expert they know they need to pay. At that point, they realize, hey, this is why I hired these folks, right? Mm-hmm. Versus 3 months later saying, hey, we're not going to be able to give you what you need.
Yeah. Or keep going and wait even past that and say, okay, I hope we catch ourselves, and I'm not going to bring it up, and I hope we deliver. Wow, and we're going to get it to them at the 11th hour.
And I hope they love it so much they won't mind paying for it.
Correct.
Or I hope we can work really fast on the back half of this project.
Correct.
Yeah. By the way, hope is not a
strategy.
Hope is not a strategy, right? So rather than hoping, let's control. Let's give people what they deserve. I had another conversation today. I'll leave you with this. We had another conversation today, and we talked about the difference between being kind and being loving. And most people, if I ask, we have so many clients that are good people, and I would tell them all the time, I had this conversation today. I said, your firm is very kind, but what you have to ask yourself is, are you loving? And what's the difference? Well, kind is just being nice, right? Kind is being non-confrontational. Kind is saying yes every time somebody asks you something. But that's not being loving. Loving is wanting the good for the other, right? Loving, when you're loving, you want the good for the other, whether that's one of your colleagues, and that's why you give them the coaching and feedback they deserve so they can be better, right? Which is why Matt's always correcting me. I like to say it's because I think he loves me. I don't know. Or he's just really mean. His family would probably tell you it's B. And then you also think about what loving means to a client. It's telling them what they need to hear before they get in trouble. They could pay anybody to be kind. There's no value in kind. I'm not suggesting ever be mean. We always want to be kind. We always want to treat others with dignity and respect. We always want to reflect love to others, right? But don't confuse kindness, just doing what they ask, letting them get in trouble, with love, which is to tell them what they need to hear and help them become better. So we hope this has been helpful for you. We hope that this week you can go out and be loving to somebody versus just being kind. We hope you can embrace a difficult conversation before it becomes difficult. Have it while it's still easy. Have it while it's still in that friendly planning stage. And we hope you have a great week as always. So thanks for finding some time to spend with us. We hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care. God bless.